what is adrenaline and then what is adrenaline dominance, which is a term you coined, I believe, right?
Yeah, well, most people have heard of adrenaline, and it's mostly known as the fight or flight hormone, and which is true. When people are in danger, the body pours out adrenaline. But that's actually a very rare reason why the body puts out adrenaline, unless you live in the Ukraine. And so adrenaline is not only a hormone, but it's a neurotransmitter. So it does a lot in the body and has a big effect on how we feel and how we act. But nobody ever talks about adrenaline. And yet it's like the number one reason why people have trouble sleeping. And we can talk later, and people will understand that it may be the number one reason why people have a weight problem, believe it or not.
So what is it to be adrenaline dominant? Does it mean that we have more adrenaline than average, or we release it more commonly? What does the term mean?
Well, adrenaline dominance, it's my own term. Mm-hmm. And basically what it does, it sort of just describes a situation where the body is putting out more adrenaline than the body needs. And this has a big effect on how people are. I'm a great believer in treating the cause of illness. and excess adrenaline is a major cause of a lot of illnesses. A lot of them felt to be incurable.
Well, yeah, I would definitely want to get into that soon. Just to emphasize about adrenaline. So what is the difference between adrenaline and noradrenaline? What is your understanding of that difference? I know that medically, adrenaline is used to reduce circulation to the extremities or to an area, and then noradrenaline is more often used as an anti-inflammatory, right? But beyond that, in terms of their function as hormones and neurotransmitters, how do they make us feel? What's the difference?
I think when people have excess noradrenaline, they have a lot of the same symptoms as people who have excess adrenaline. So I don't separate the two.
Oh, so that you class them together?
Yeah.
Okay. And so why do some people have higher adrenaline than others? What's your understanding? I think you mentioned earlier maybe you thought genetics, but is there any other factors that would cause some people to be adrenaline dominant and not others? Or does everyone have adrenaline dominance based on your definition?
Well, yeah, the primary reason why people will have excess adrenaline or adrenaline dominance is genetic. So if a child has ADHD, for example, then one or both parents will have ADHD.
Okay, so genetics the main thing, and could trauma, in early life and stuff like that, cause someone to be hypervigilant and have more adrenaline as well?
No, it's genetics.
Okay, fair enough. I'm a believer in genetics. I have a whole company doing it. I was just curious what you thought. Okay. And now you just mentioned ADHD. That leads perfectly to my next question. So this is one of the distinctions I loved in your book, because, of course, ADHD is generally thought of, as far as I'm aware, anyway, as like a dopamine deficiency, which is why they treat it usually with drugs that increase dopamine. So what is your understanding of what ADHD is, what really causes it, and then what are the types of ADHD?
ADHD, which most of your listeners will realize, it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so that's one type of ADHD. There's another type that I call a creative type ADHD. And these are the children that have trouble focusing, but they're not hyperactive. And yet, children with this type of ADHD, the creative type, they have more adrenaline than kids with ADHD. And the reason for that is that ADHD, it's not a learning disorder, it's an interest disorder. If they're interested, they'll focus. If they're not interested, they will not focus. But what's interesting, again, when it comes down to treating the cause, if you treat the cause of ADHD, you can actually eliminate ADHD in 24 hours. A lot of these kids are put on stimulants, Ritalin, Statera, Adderall, and and these drugs are pure adrenaline. And what they do, they actually numb the brain. And that's why a lot of kids don't like these drugs. And one of the side effects is sudden death, because these kids have a lot of adrenaline to begin with, and you give them more adrenaline. But if you understand why the body is putting out adrenaline and approach it from that direction, then you can get a tremendous decrease in adrenaline very quickly.
And let's just ask that before I go back to ADHD, because I think you were about to say it, maybe I interrupted you. So why is the body creating that excess adrenaline? As you said, usually it's not because there's a real life-threatening situation happening outside us. So what is it?
Well, there's basically two reasons why the body puts out adrenaline. One, if they're in danger, but that's actually a very rare reason why the body puts out adrenaline. The primary function of adrenaline is to raise sugar levels for the brain. It's a process called gluconeogenesis, where the body converts protein into glucose, sugar. And that's the main function of adrenaline, is to raise sugar levels for the brain. And most people don't realize that the brain actually uses more sugar than any other tissue in the body. So anytime the body detects that the brain is low in sugar, it just puts out adrenaline.
And so you talked about those people with ADHD before. So is the reason why they need, do they use their brain more, and that's why they need more sugar to the brain? Is that?
Well, the creative ones, they use their brain more. If you look at the music industry, a lot of drugs and alcohol. And people, when they have a lot of adrenaline, very often get involved with drugs and alcohol just to relax, just to chill out. But creative people their brain is active all the time. This is why creative people, when they're in a car, very often get very sleepy, because their mind is registering all that scenery that's going by, and they're thinking about things and talking, listening to the radio. In other words, the brain just uses up a lot of fuel, and when it runs out of fuel, it falls asleep.
And if you don't want to fall asleep, or you mustn't fall asleep, as you just said, like if you're driving or you're at work or something, then the body will release adrenaline to release sugar to keep the brain awake.
Right, and I mentioned, at the beginning, that I started using progesterone and then I never got sleepy, and that's because progesterone blocks insulin. So people that have trouble getting sleepy in a car, once they start using progesterone, will not get sleepy.